I'm live for the first time ever on YouTube and Facebook. And for those who aren't aware, every Wednesday I take to video and I go live to do my Mystery Unsolved series. And sometimes I give updates on my book or my writing progress. But today, again, a special day because I am live for the first time on YouTube and Facebook. So hopefully they are streaming live to those platforms. Um, Before I get into today's mystery unsolved video, let's just get the let's just talk about the elephant in the room. My right eye is swollen. No idea why. It's been like that since last night. I've been putting a hot compress on it. It doesn't hurt. I'm not in any danger. So glad I could clear that up. So, in the meantime, today's mystery unsolved video is the 1962 prison escape of Alcatraz. This is a case that has been talked about since it happened, and it's a case that I find fascinating. So anytime I see, a documentary on it on television, I always watch it, even though what more could you possibly teach me about it that I don't already know? But figured I'd educate and get some people interested in that don't know about it. So without any further ado, today's mystery unsolved case, the 1962 prison escape of Alcatraz. Now, again, for those who have never seen me on video, I'm not a professional by any means, so if you're used to somebody not looking down at a piece of paper, tough luck. I have to look over at a little small piece of paper that I happen to have right here that I write down. So, on June 11th, 1962, at approximately 10:30, Frank Morris, along with John and Clarence Anglin, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, made their attempt to escape from Alcatraz. Now, if anybody has heard anything about Alcatraz, you know that was a hard prison to escape from. It was said to be unescapable, but these three men did it. So yeah, at approximately 10:30, they made their attempt, and it was more than an attempt. They did it. They successfully escaped from Alcatraz. It was the next morning when people found out that things got a little crazy. So how did they pull this off? Well, the first thing to know is that they planned this for months. 16 months to be exactly. So we're talking a year and then some. One of the things that they did was to conceal. Obviously, how did they get out? Well, ventilation ducts, the ceiling, whole bunch of good stuff, right? So how did they conceal the work that they did? Well, they actually they had to widen the ventilation duct so that they could go through the tunnel and out. But obviously, they couldn't have done this all in one shot. Did this through a span of a year. And one thing that they did was they actually painted cardboard as like they actually made, one of them made a ventilation duct out of paper mache, out of cardboard, and they placed it there. So anytime a guard would walk by, he would just, either not see it or make nothing of it because it looked normal, when in reality, it was fake. Another thing that they did is they gathered up all the tools that they would need to work on stuff. Now, in case you didn't know, after a while, certain prisoners get certain privileges. These guys had a lot of privileges in the right areas. One of the men was a barber, which will come in was well, he worked in the barber shop, which will come in handy, as I'll mention later. Another guy, he had a lot of tools, so he was able to use tools, and of course, he would take the tools after he was done. He was supposed to just leave the tools there, but he's not going to do that. He would take the tools with him, like a chisel, a hammer, if you will, a screwdriver, all the things needed to just chisel away at the wall. How do they take for the sound? one of the men actually played accordion. So, uh, no, actually, a lot of times, many of the prisoners actually played musical instruments during a certain time. So when it was musical time, that's when the guys got to work. And then after it was done, they went back to their cells, covered up their evidence, and yeah. The last thing, which I find to perhaps be the best of all, is they made paper mache casts of their heads. And, as good as you can make yourself out to be using paper mache. And remember, I said one of the guys worked at a barber shop. He used the hair. So they had actually real authentic hair on the paper mache heads. And they actually placed them in their beds. And of course, they covered them with a blanket so it looked like they were in their cells. So the next morning, when they did, Morris, cell check, England, cell check, they didn't move. So the guards found it suspicious. And of course, when they opened the cell, he poked the head, and the head just fell right off the bed and onto the floor. They then realized that three of the men had escaped the prison. I always found it's a fascinating story. But the mystery, of course, is only one of two things. Did they actually escape? Like, did they survive and make it to land? Or did they die? Did they not make it? Um, in previous videos, for those that don't know, usually when I do a case like this, there's a bunch of scenarios and I go over them. In this case, there's only two. They had survived or they didn't. So, before I get into that, I should also note that they also used weather jackets and they got a bunch of them. They gathered them up. Again, these guys got so many privileges, it was crazy. And they actually stored all these jackets aside, and they actually made a raft out of it. So it's implied that after they concocted this raft, that they went on the raft and they sailed out to I believe, the San Francisco Bay, and that they landed on Angel Island, I believe is the name of it, or the places where they supposedly survived. So, did they survive or didn't they? Well, what's my opinion? It's really hard to say because, again, I've seen so many documentaries on this that one time I watched it and I said, "Yeah, they made it." Other times I've watched it and I've said, "You know what? Maybe they didn't." It's been implied. Sorry about that. I had a minor distraction. So basically, one documentary showed that the Anglin brothers survived and they actually went to Brazil and they lived out the rest of their lives and they died at the ages of like 88 and 87. But a lot of them also, almost all the documentaries, sorry, I'm getting fidgety here. They all suggest that the Anglin brothers survived, but Frank Morris didn't. Most of the documentaries suggest this. I think if two of them survived, then why didn't Frank Morris survive? I don't know. Here's my opinion. I think they survived. I think Frank Morris went his separate way, and the Anglin brothers went their separate way. There was also a video in the 70s, not a video, a photo in the 70s that was suggested to be the Anglin brothers in Brazil. I don't know how authentic or real that is, but I think it's a bunch of bull. There was also a documentary that the Anglin family, they actually did DNA research and testing to find out whether or not um, it was possible that they survived. And of course, it was inconclusive. Of course, if you ask the family, they're going to say, "Yeah, I think they survived. I used to get postcards from them." Like they want it to be true, and I don't blame them. But it was always from the Anglin aspect. Very rarely from any documentary I've ever seen on the Alcatraz escape is Frank Morris ever mentioned. It's usually always implied that Morris drowned trying to become free. But I would think that, if again, if those two survived, then why wouldn't Morris have survived? Um, so bunch of scenarios. They escaped, they didn't escape. Branching off of that, it's also suggested that there's a small cave. Well, basically, that Alcatraz is an island, so there's a bunch. It's called the Rock for a reason. It's implied that there's actually a cave. There actually is like a small little cave opening on Alcatraz, like just below the bottom, near the water. And it's suggested that they actually got caught up in this cave, and the waters were too treacherous, and that one of them actually died right there. But of course, there was no body ever found, so that just kind of throws that out the window. So, sorry again, minor distraction. So whether or not they made it off the island, that's the big thing here. And obviously, I think they made it off the island because they must have, because they never found any bodies in the water, found any bodies off the coast of Alcatraz. So if anything, they made it somewhere, and if they died, like that's what never made sense to me. Is, oh well, the men drowned. Well, if they drowned, then why weren't their bodies ever found? Or did they ever try to find the bodies? You see, different story conflicts. So I like to believe, through everything I've read or heard or watched on this, I think they survived. They made it to Angel Island, and they lived out the rest of their natural born lives. Because that's a good story. To imply that, they didn't make it. The waters was There was a storm that night that they escaped. And when it was so treacherous that they didn't survive. Okay, but there would have to be bodies, which they never have said that they found. Or maybe they just, drifted because they were in such a mass body of water that, yeah, you're not going to find bodies. Yeah, okay, but I like to think that they survived. So, if anyone watching, of course, has thoughts, I'm always open to them. Do you think that the 1962 Alcatraz prison escape, do you think they survived? Do you think they died? It's it's a question. It's a question to ask. Um, I will conclude this part of the video by adding this. In 1979, the FBI closed the case, concluding the men had probably drowned. Okay, so they leave the case open for all that time, and as you should, because by then it probably was it's a cold case. But then 1979 comes around, and the FBI is just like, you know what? Let's just close it. We haven't found anything new. Round case closed. The funny part is, I've never heard if they never found bodies, but they can still just assume that the guy's drowned. Okay. The funny part is, since 1979, again, documentaries, books, people, reports have all come out since 1979 that give basically new information, new debates about this. Sorry, I keep looking at my paper thinking I have something else here, but yeah, so throughout the years, new evidence has come forward. But as much evidence that comes out, there's never anything definitive for people to turn around and say, yes, the men survived. No, the men are dead. It's pretty much up in the air. And that's what makes this such a great mystery, is the fact that it's unsolved. We don't know what happened to the men, and we're probably going to keep wondering what happened to the men for the next 40 years. It's just one of those good cases where we don't know what happened to Frank Morris, John, or Clarence Anglin. So this has been my latest Mystery Unsolved video. For those who watch it, I hope you enjoyed it. For those who watch it on the playback, I also hope you enjoy it. Um, what is next? What is what's for next week? I'm not sure, but I do have a list of videos that I've been doing, that I want to do actually, I should say. So hopefully I'll come up with one. I'm not gonna just say one right now because I don't know. Um, I decided on Alcatraz today because I figured there was a good transition last week where I said, "Hey, I'll do Alcatraz next week," and it seemed good. But yeah, so hopefully next week's Mystery Unsolved video will be as good as the rest and as good as this one. And I will probably have some updates on the progress of the Wax Menagerie next week. Oh my God. Yeah, I have done nothing on it, I'll be totally honest. But I'll give you some progress for sure on the Wax Menagerie next week. So again, this was the first video that I have done where I am live on Twitter. Well, I'm always on Twitter. Facebook for the first time ever, and YouTube. So hopefully I showed on those two platforms. And yeah, not sure if I'm gonna go on Instagram because Instagram you can't stream with this. You don't care about that. So yeah, this has been Mystery Unsolved. Until next week.